Welcome to the IVM Podcast Network.
The OnCourse Podcast is an IVM production. And if you like this show, check out Geek Fruit for in-depth conversations about pop culture, science fiction, and overall nerd culture. You don't want to miss this.
You're listening to the OnCourse Podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the OnCourse Podcast. OnCourse is a creative and alternate education company that aims to bridge the gap between formal classroom education and real-world skills. We offer a range of programs from short skill-based courses to test prep to application assistance for those looking to study abroad. My name is Alisha Mashruwala. I'm the CEO and co-founder at OnCourse.
Hi everyone, my name is Akhil Daswani. I'm the COO and co-founder of OnCourse. And today in the studio we have with us Ashna Nasta, who is a senior associate and head of UPrep at OnCourse.
Hi guys.
How's it going?
It's going great.
So I think today what we're going to cover and what will be really good for everyone to know, and these are questions that everyone has, is sort of the difference between the SAT and the ACT, which are standardized tests that a lot of students tend to think about or want to give. So just to start very simply, Asha, can you tell us what is the SAT or what is the ACT?
So they're actually both standardized tests that colleges look out for when you're applying for your undergraduate admission. So typically it's the colleges in the US, Singapore and Hong Kong that need the SAT or the ACT along with the rest of your application. And it's a way for college to judge your problem-solving skills and your critical thinking ability, which you see in the form of reading, writing and math passages.
So with the SAT or ACT, like you mentioned, for the countries that it's required, is it given a lot of weightage, more than, say, any school grades or any of the other kind of components that go into it?
So typically for the US colleges, it's around 30% of your application. So while 50% is your academics, it's 30% is the SAT or the ACT. Doesn't matter which one you take.
Okay. So actually a fairly large component as well.
Yeah.
So with the SAT, can you tell us a little bit about the difference between the two tests, SAT and ACT? And also, a lot of people have questions on whether one test is preferred over another test.
So from a college perspective, there is no preference between the two tests. You can take whichever one you're more comfortable with, and that's important for you to see both the tests and see where you're naturally inclined towards, where your aptitude lies. So if you compare the two tests, the SAT is made up of two components, math and English, and then further broken down into 5 sections. So you have the reading section, the grammar section, the math calculator, math non-calculator, and the essay section. Whereas the ACT has math, English and science and is also broken down into 5 components. So you have 2 English-based sections, reading and grammar. Then you have the math section, the science section and the essay section. So between the two tests, what really differentiates them is that extra science section that the ACT offers and the SAT doesn't. But that science section is not pure science like physics, chemistry or bio. It's more data analysis. So it depends whether you can read graphs properly, whether you can understand visual references, whether you can actually understand what's going on in the science passage and then answer the questions accordingly. You don't need any past science knowledge to actually answer the questions over there.
So just from your experience, Ashna, what kind of students will be better suited for the SAT versus the ACT?
So there's a myth that the engineers are better suited for the ACT, but that's not entirely true because the ACT also has a lot of reading component in it. So the best way to decide between the two is to take a diagnostic test where you do a full-length SAT, a full-length ACT, and then see which test is more suitable for you. So there's no blanket rule that states certain kind of kids are better suited for the SAT or the ACT.
And is the study style for both of them different? So like you mentioned, the components actually are fairly similar besides the science section. Is this the way you study for an SAT different from the way you would study for an ACT test?
So conceptually, they're both 90% similar, but the strategy is different. With the ACT, it's more about quick thinking and mental math and a lot of fast reading skills and being able to solve math at a shorter speed. Whereas in the SAT, it's more strategy based. So you have more time per question. You actually have to sit, break down the question, understand what the question's asking you, and then really solve it. With the ACT, the questions are more direct, but it's more time intensive, so you typically have less than 1 minute per question to actually solve it. So the strategy that goes over here is what is the fastest way to solve the sum, whereas with the SAT, it's what is the strategically correct way to solve the sum.
So it's more inference-based, the SAT, and then the ACT, I guess, is a little bit more direct, but you have to be really quick.
Yes, that's right.
Awesome. So I think there are a few schools, if I'm not mistaken, which don't require the SAT or ACT. Is that a small number, and is that growing?
So there are a few schools in the US which don't require the SAT or the ACT. Those are called test optional schools. So the popular ones who don't require the tests are NYU, Wesleyan College. So you don't need the ACT or the SAT for all the colleges. Even the UK, for example, doesn't require the SAT or the ACT. So you can definitely apply there without your tests. And yes, you're right. There are a lot of colleges which are leaning towards a test optional route now.
That's awesome. So even if I haven't given my SAT or ACT, I could still be applying to some of the good schools.
Yes, absolutely.
Great.
And with the SAT and ACT, you talked about different strategies for how, people should be preparing for it and, the diagnostic tests. Is there, the SAT I've heard has changed completely since the last couple of years. So what is the difference between what it used to be? Because I know a lot of listeners are probably used to hearing the SAT being on a 2400 scale. So what's the difference between the old SAT and the new SAT?
So the old SAT was on 2400 and was divided into 3 parts. You had the critical reading, you had writing, and you had math. And the essay fell under the writing section and was compulsory. So each section being 800 points, it totaled up to 2400. With the new SAT, it's on 1600, where English takes up 800, both the sections, math, both sections total up to 800. And you have a separate essay section, which is optional and does not add up to your 1600. So here what happens is your math and English have a 50-50% weightage, whereas on the old SAT, it was 2/3 English and 1/3 math.
So it's fair to say that someone who was better in English before was doing the SAT, and someone who was better in math or science before was doing the ACT.
Yeah, that worked with the old SAT, not so much with the new one.
Okay.
And how does the scoring work for the ACT?
So the ACT is on a total of 36 points, wherein each section is on 36. So your 4 sections are on 36, which are then averaged out again on 36. And you have an optional essay section, which doesn't add to the 36 score.
So for kids who are applying and, taking the SAT or ACT and they want to go to colleges in the US, since the essay section isn't exact part of the score, is it required for them to write the essay or is it actually optional?
So most colleges actually do require the writing section for both the SAT and the ACT. So it's recommended that when the kids are registering for the test, they do select the essay for both the tests. And the reason the colleges want to see your essay score is basically to judge your writing style, which they use later to compare to your essays. So for example, if your writing score is very weak on the SAT, but you sent an amazing Common App essay to the colleges, they'll know you did not write the Common App essay. So the writing score is important, even though it doesn't add to the total.
Wow, that's interesting. Can you explain to our listeners how super scoring works? And does it work equally for both the SAT and ACT?
Sure. So super scoring is basically when you take 2 different components across 2 different test attempts and then combine them. For example, if you did the SAT in October and in December, and you scored a 700 in math and a 600 in English in your October attempt, and you scored a 700 in English and a 600 in math in the December attempt, what you can do is you can pick and choose the scores across the 2 attempts. So you can take your best scores from each, which is 700 and 700, and get a 1400 super score instead of the individual 1300 score attempts. And that's for the SAT. The ACT also does allow super scoring, but there are very few colleges that actually accept the ACT super scoring. There are more colleges that accept the SAT super scoring. So it's advisable that you check with the college you're applying to whether or not they allow the super scoring.
Okay, guys, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation on the SAT and the ACT.
Every week comes a show where 3 people come together to tell you about stuff they like. A movie, a TV show, a book, and other stuff. Tune in every Monday on the IVM Podcast app to IVM Likes. Batman approves this message. Thank you, Batman.
Hi guys, welcome back. We're in conversation with Ashna, talking about the SAT and ACT. So Ashna, tell us a little bit about the test dates. When are the SAT and ACT administered? Like how often, and when should our students be taking them?
So the SAT recently just changed the available dates available internationally. So the next one available for the listeners in India or anywhere else outside the US is October. And after that, we've got December, March, and May. So you have a total of 4 attempts in the year where you can take the SAT one. Whereas the ACT currently has 5 attempts. We have April, then we have June, September, October, and December as the available attempts outside the US.
So if someone's doing the ACT, I heard that sort of covers up for your SAT 2 requirement. Does that work?
So again, there's no blanket rule for that. There are a few colleges which allow you to skip the SAT 2 if you've done the ACT, but there are a handful of colleges that need you to take the SAT 2 even if you've done the ACT before. And many of the engineering colleges actually require you to take the SAT 2 because they do want to see where your skill lies with math and sciences as well.
So what exactly is a SAT 2? So who takes it, and what are the subjects that are available?
So the SAT 2 is basically the SAT subject test, and the kind of subjects which are available are math in 2 levels, 1 and 2, the sciences, so physics, chemistry, bio. You also have English literature and world history. These are the most popular subjects available. There are also languages like Spanish, Greek, and Latin which are available. But typically the kids take math and sciences in the SAT 2.
And is there a reason that they take more of the sciences and not English literature, world history?
So most kids, at least in India, are more suited towards taking the math or the science section of the SAT 2. And if you're doing the sciences in the IB or the ISC, a lot of the component is already covered in your school syllabus. So that makes it easier to study for the SAT 2.
Okay. And for the SAT or the ACT that students would take, you did go through sort of the dates that are available. But when is the right time for a student to kind of consider which is a better test for them, or even to take the diagnostic test and then take their first attempt?
So the best time to take the diagnostic test would be soon after your 10th grade board exam. So ICSE, IGCSE, whatever your board is. Take the diagnostic soon after and then decide whether you're preparing for the SAT and ACT. That summer itself is a good time to start preparing for the test. And the fall of grade 11, so if you're currently in grade 11, then this October, November, December is a good time for you to at least take the first attempt for your SAT or ACT.
Okay.
Awesome. And, I think the diagnostic test has been something which a lot of people have been asking about. What do you think is the best approach to taking a diagnostic?
So the best approach to take a diagnostic is to take a full-length test in each of the 2 tests and then see what you're more comfortable with. Taking just parts of the test or just sections is not enough because you're not able to test yourself on the stamina or the speed that's required for either of the 2 tests.
Okay. And you can take the SAT and ACT multiple times.
Yes.
So with the SAT or ACT, when is a good time for a student to take a second attempt if required? And when is the right time for them to consider taking SAT subject tests?
So the second attempt depends on your first attempt score. So if you're happy with your first attempt score, then well and good, you don't need the second attempt. For the second attempt would be maybe the March or April of, again, your grade 11 itself. So the summer before your grade 12 is when you actually take the second attempt. And in terms of the SAT 2, that same summer is a good time to take it. So unlike SAT 1, there's also a SAT 2 attempt available in June. So if you have your summer break going on in June and July, then June's a good time to take the SAT subject test.
Awesome. And obviously the dreaded question, right? Like, what should a student look to score if he wants to go to a good college?
It depends what you classify as a good college. So if you're looking at the top schools like the Ivy League colleges and the likes, and you're looking at least a 15-20 plus on the SAT and a 34 plus on the ACT. If you're looking at above average colleges, then anything between a 1400 and 1450 plus puts you in good range for those schools, and a 31 plus on the ACT puts you in range for those schools.
So are you saying if I score below 1300, I shouldn't be applying to college?
I'm not saying that. You can still apply to the colleges. It's just the category of colleges you're applying to will be different.
And I guess in that case, you would consider potentially those test optionals ones that you talked about earlier as well.
Of course, yes, you can look at those as well.
And there's some kids who are just bad test takers, right? So will colleges kind of factor that in when they're making their decisions?
They will, because if you're applying to schools that look at your test scores, then that 30% is still going to be considered for your SAT score.
Okay. And there are students who, typically have some sort of, if they have a learning disability, so any of those things, is there any extra time that the SAT or the ACT gives these kind of students?
Yes, actually both the SAT and the ACT does give extra time if required. You need to show medical certificates and prove what your disability is. Typically, the best way to go about it is to go through your school or college where you're currently studying, because they do want the school counselor also to vouch on the fact that you really need the extra time. And you have to apply at least 1 month prior to the actual deadline, so they can arrange for special accommodation to be made for you. So it depends on how much extra time you need. It could be 50% extra time. It could even be 100% extra time. And that is available for both SAT and ACT.
And I guess that holds for even, say, students who have issues with math. If they had non-calculator section, they would be able to use a calculator as well?
Yeah, it's a case-by-case situation. So it depends on what your medical certificates show them, and accordingly, they'll make the provisions for you.
Awesome. And just to sort of understand, how colleges view kids with disabilities, are they looked upon as, is it negative to have that because they've asked for extra time?
No, not at all. Don't look at it negatively at all. In fact, they're just going to see what your final score is. The college is not concerned about the fact that you got extra time for the test.
And for those who are now considering the October attempt or the December attempt, where do they register? How do they register for these tests?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, how much in advance should they register?
So the registration date normally shuts 1 month before the final SAT or ACT date, but it's always good to register sooner, because if your center fills up, then that's it. You'll have to go to a different city to actually give the test. So the ones who are looking at October this year should already start registering for the test. There are a lot of centers available in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Pune. Most of the main cities in India have the centers, and it's always good to be giving the SAT or ACT in your own city itself. So for the SAT, you have to register on collegeboard.org. For the ACT, you have to register on act.org. The registration process is pretty simple. You just have to fill up the form, select your test date and test center, pay via credit card, and that will give you the admission ticket, which you need to take on the final day.
And any advice you have for students who are now looking at doing standardized tests?
Give as many practice tests as possible. 10 to 15 is a good number of practice tests. Make sure these tests are timed and that you give them continuously. So don't give one section on Saturday, the next section on Sunday. That doesn't really count. You need to sit for 4 hours straight and actually give all the sections together.
Awesome. And any advice for younger kids who want to prepare themselves in advance for the SATs?
So 9th and 10th graders, you actually have the chance of taking something called the PSAT or the pre-ACT. You have to do this through your school though. So see what test is offered by your school and go ahead and give that test. You don't need to really prepare for that test, but it's good to take it just to have an idea as to what the SAT or ACT really is.
Is that factored into your college admissions?
No, it's not.
And I guess the 9th and 10th graders, important thing, clearly from what we've seen, since it's all strategy-based and inference-based, they should definitely be reading.
Absolutely, yeah. Reading is a skill you should have right from maybe 7th or 8th grade. And by 9th grade, if you're not reading, then yes, you should start right now.
Great. Thanks, Ashna, for all the information and advice on the SAT and ACT. For anyone who has further questions or wants to contact us, you can contact us at info@oncourseglobal.com. You can visit our website, www.oncourseglobal.com, or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. Sorry to say, but there's been a slight delay due to the apocalypse having suddenly begun. As you can see, there's death, destruction, and chaos taking place all around us. But don't you worry, food and drinks will be served shortly, and I would recommend checking out
IVM Podcasts
to get some of your favorite Indian podcasts. We'll keep you going till this whole thing blows over. Thank you.